I would like to see more collaboration across the frameworks. Vite is like a shining example of what happens when you have like a solid foundation that everybody can use, and we can have these discussions about features that we're building or features that we want without, hey, my thing is better than yours.
Hello, welcome to the devtools-fm podcast. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Jess.
Hey, everyone. We're really excited to have Brandon Roberts on with us today. This is kind of a fun episode. Brandon and I actually share an alma mater. We went to the same college, which is a small world.
Very.
So that was a fun learning experience. So Brandon, you've done a lot of really interesting stuff. So you're the creator of Analog.js. We're really excited to talk about that. You've done some work around maintaining NGRX. So we're excited to sort of dig into that ecosystem a little bit. And you're working on OpenSauced. So we had Brian Douglas on, B-Dougie on a little while back.
Yep.
And it was a super fun episode and really love what you're building there. So excited to talk about that too. Before we dig in, would you like to tell our listeners any more about yourself?
Yeah, well, I guess you got the good intro in there. I always tell people you can follow me on Twitter, Brandon T. Roberts. I have fun on Twitter. I block people sometimes, but generally it's mostly in fun. The most ideal place you can follow me, I'm on, GitHub and things like that. I don't know if people actually do anything with following people on GitHub, but I'm on there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the places. But yeah, you'll mostly find me on there ranting about something. Sometimes.
That's actually a good segue. The place you work at is a place that's trying to make GitHub better. One of the things that GitHub does suck at is, why would you follow people? Like, they don't even surface a good way to use that information. So for our listeners who might not know what OpenSauced is, could you explain it a little bit? And then tell us about something cool you've shipped lately.
Yeah, so OpenSauced is an insights platform into open source, where you can learn all about insights into different things that happen in open source. You can find out trends. We have pages where you can see analytics on individual repositories, as well as another thing we call workspaces, where you can see all the workspaces that you're interested in and get some analytics on those. But yeah, we provide actionable insights into open source, whether you're a maintainer at a company, open source first company, or even a company that uses a lot of open source, and you want to gain some insight and see, what does health look like? What does, a good open source project look like? And we can provide all those stats and things that you're looking for there. So yeah, that's what OpenSauced is in a nutshell. You can go to opensauced.pizza, of course. Love the domain there to find out more information about that. And something we've shipped just recently here is what we're calling the Oscar score, which is an open source contributor rating, where you can find out information about, if you're new to open source, if you've been in open source for a while, you can actually see your impact, what you're doing across different areas. So that'll be something that, people can actually go and check their own score. And, you can kind of think it's not necessarily like a credit score where but it is does have a sliding scale there, just to see what your impact is and see where, what kind of things that you're doing to contribute to open source and help open source in general move forward. So excited about that.
So that probably takes in more than just like your contribution graph, right? It's like looking at everything.
Yeah, it definitely takes in more than it's not just started, but definitely not just based on stuff. I don't even think it factors in repos that you start or anything, but it takes a lot of things in. Like your PRs is probably one of the biggest things people look at, but we also factor a few other things in there, as far as your engagement with other people and just generally how you interact in open source. And all those things kind of build up that score that you have. So, and it's something that builds up over time. So if you're relatively new, you're going to have some work to do there, but I think it's a good enough time window that you can see, what a good particular rating looks like, or something to aspire to in open source.
So using OpenSauced, can I see trends that are kind of happening on GitHub? Like over the past few weeks, there's been a movement called E18E, which I think is like ecosystem cleanup, where you can see a bunch of different people like swapping out packages and targeting very specific things to update. So can you from like a high level see that from OpenSauced?
Um, I think we have some, if I'm not mistaken, we do have some endpoints that kind of surface repositories that have a lot of activity, or they're like trending and things like that based on, contributions and things like that. But it is something that we've kind of seen in our data. We aren't necessarily surfacing that today, but we have been able to dig into the data that we have to see trends like that as far as repositories with a lot of activity, different things like that. So, one thing that we do have on OpenSauce is repository pages where you can actually go into a particular repositories. You can see pull requests, contributions over different time spans, and also see a few things that we've some more insights that we've talked about. One of those things being like YOLO coders, we call them, where people who just push the main as opposed to doing pull requests, because sometimes there are repositories out there from the data that we've seen that uh, they don't look like they have a lot of contributions, but that's because, like I said, YOLO, the main person is pushing to main, and then the other people are doing pull requests. I think the repository we were looking at was PG Vector, was like the main contributor, was just he just pushes commits to main, and then everybody else does PRs. But so it looked like they didn't have a lot of activity, but in fact it was just that person, a particular person, was the maintainer, and they have been maintaining a project for a long time, so they kind of know the ins and outs. They're just kind of going forward with that. So things like that, little nuggets like that, you can kind of glean from there on those repository pages, and then we're kind of sprinkling those throughout the platform also.
It's fun. It makes me wonder if there could be like a repository like maturity score, almost, because there's like certain things that matter, like, oh, do people use the PR flow? Do they have CI set up? Are reviews actually done? There's like a lot of stuff. Is there a license? Is there a README? All these things that go into like, is this like a mature?
Yeah, we are.
It's
Yeah, we are
interesting.
surfacing some of those things too, like what license are they using, and there's another thing we call contributor confidence, and Brian probably talked about this also, but where you can see what's the likelihood of somebody starring your repo or forking it and actually coming back and making a contribution, and things like that. But yeah, I think those are good ideas. Also, things you could people, so different insights mean different things to different people. So some people look at the YOLO coders like, hey, I have to do that, so I have to do that for releases or things like that. So it just depends on the perspective of contributors and maintainers, I think.
Given that y'all are sort of building almost like an analytics and insights company around like this work area, like open source software, I'm sure you've had exposure to like a lot of data just surrounding how people are using open source projects or contributing to them or whatever. I'm curious from your perspective what you think some of the biggest issues are in the open source space, and maybe to sort of add on to that, what sort of problems y'all are seeking to solve by
Mhm.
providing your solution.
Yeah. So for me, I guess I've done this a couple of times at this point across different projects, but uh, the the biggest issue I've seen that has kind of more or less impacted me in the project that I've worked on is was part of its funding, because the biggest one of the biggest issues that is that people just inherently want everything in open source to be free, and they want, but it takes time, it takes resources for people to work on these projects, and myself included, and there has to be a way, some sort of path that we can go to make that process easier. I mean, we have things like GitHub sponsors, and you can kind of basically go on the into like pitch mode, and ask people to donate to your project, or then you get enough adoption to where it becomes a critical part of people's infrastructure, but still they could still just take that and just use it for free, with even without you knowing, or without ever like donating or anything like that. So having some sort of way to connect maintainers to companies, uh, to be able to maybe start that conversation, I think is a big part of that. And part of what we do in OpenSauced is uh, we could help tell that story. We can help, see the adoption over time, see that you're contributing to a piece of critical infrastructure, to even at a contributor level, or even at like a maintainer level. Someone who's an open source first company, they can see, the projects that are depending on their see who's depending on their project per se. But as far as even contributors and people coming along, those are the type of problems that we're looking to solve, as far as surfacing that information in meaningful ways. And even some of the companies that are doing open source today, they're like, we're doing open source. We got a lot of things out there. We don't know what to do with all this information that we have. And we're looking to solve that as far as giving them, like I said, actionable insights and things that they can actually take back to their stakeholders and say, hey, we got a steady stream of contributions. We know that these companies are kind of using our project and everything. So how can we better reach out to them, or find out who our key contributors are, to see if you're open source first company, and you're building with open source contributors. Maybe you want to hire those people onto your team. We're not a hiring platform by any means, but you can actually see who those like we call them tastemakers and like influential people in your projects are, as opposed to people who come by and submit a PR and then like you never see them again. So there's a different ways you can like slice and dice that to see that type of information, and those are the type of things that we're working to surface in a more meaningful way, not just like the top level metrics like everybody looks at stars and things like that, or downloads. But if you can definitely glean more information looking further into that data.
Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about some of the open source that you help maintain. We'd like to thank our sponsor for the week, Mux. Mux is a super cool platform that lets you enable video in your app easier than ever before. From experience, I know that integrating video at scale with all the bells and whistles that you might want is hard. You have to think about hosting. You have to think about video formats. You have to think about streams. You have to think about changing quality for different network conditions. There's just no end to the improvements that you could make to a video hosting platform. That's where Mux comes in. Mux makes it super simple to do all the things I just said and so much more. They have APIs that allow you to upload, host, and stream video in any way that you want. This week, I'd like to highlight their awesome player. The player supports all those things I just listed and is super customizable. By just using a web component or even a React component, you can add nice full-featured video players to your apps in seconds. You can then customize those players with CSS, and the themes that they provide fit most situations. You can tell their expertise here because they've thought of all the details. If you go through their docs, they've even thought about things like lazy loading the players and making sure the page doesn't shift while the players load. If you want to bring this video expertise into your stack, head over to mux.com to check them out. Are you tired of hearing these ads? Become a member on one of the various channels that we offer it. With that, you'll get the episodes a little bit earlier and you won't have to hear any of these. But if you don't want to do that, you can also head over to shop.devtools-fm where you can pick up a hat, a shirt, maybe even an apron for this summer's cookout. With that, let's get back to the episode. Before we get into like your big personal project that you've been working on over the past few months, let's talk about NGRX. So what is NGRX and how did you find yourself to be the lead maintainer on it?
Yeah, so NGRX is, I call it the OG, and I'm one of the OGs on NGRX at this point. But NGRX is a set of libraries for building reactive Angular applications. Angular, mainly state management, is pretty much our bread and butter there. The project was founded by Rob Ormald, who used to work at Google on the Angular team. And he started this project separately while he was on the Angular team, but as a separate project. And because he kind of saw what was happening, or how Angular was being built at the time, and what they kind of needed at that point in time. And so he started the project, and then we were building something, me and my friend Mike Ryan, were building something internally that was very similar to what NGRX was out in the open. So we figured the thing we built there, we couldn't open source it. It was one of those things that kind of stayed where we left it. So but we ended up starting to contribute to NGRX. And long story short, there we started contributing. Rob saw what we were doing. He invited us to come on and start contributing more. And then we basically took over the project from there very early on and kind of shepherded it, creating different libraries to build on top of the base package, which was NGRX store, which was based on the Redux pattern. So we took some of those features and continued to build NGRX into what it is today. And the team has grown across time, and the project is still being heavily maintained, and even our usage is still growing to this day. So very, very proud of what NGRX has become over the years. It's been I don't know, at least what is this, maybe 8 years at this point, I think, that we've maintained the project. So definitely has come a long way.
That's a really good run.
Yeah.
So just sort of like digging into it a little bit more, I'm not super familiar with the project. So you mentioned having a sort of like similar modeling as Redux. Mm-hmm. When I heard NGRX, I was thinking RxJS, like the observables, like library. Is there any relationship between those, or is it like very much just like pattern, sort of in a more Redux style?
Yeah, they're actually directly related. We depend on both. And depending on depending on your viewpoint, you may see this as a good thing, as a bad thing, but it is Redux and it is RxJS, and we mix those two things together in a cohesive way to manage state in Angular. And of course, RxJS is built on top of observables, which have been discussed, back and forth, and even maybe make it to into the browser at some point. But NGRX is a combination of those two things to manage state. So we still, as far as the Redux pattern go, we still model things after events and use actions where we dispatch to a store and combine and take that state, and we deliver that state to components using observables in Angular, or even more recently using like signals in Angular. But yeah, you still use that same like Redux pattern, and we've built around some APIs on top of that to make it less boilerplatey. Which is a thing that people associate Redux with a lot. So that's how it's built on top of like Angular primitives. So like it's well integrated with how Angular works, and each version gets a major release with the version of Angular, and a very like I said, cohesive experience there that we wanted to do with NGRX. And we just released a new package there for NGRX and Angular signals. So this is a slightly different spin on what we've done before with the Redux pattern. So the NGRX signals package is another state management library, but it's based around like the new world of Angular today, where it's just mainly focused around signals. And then if you want to bring RxJS in, you can, but you don't have to bring it in, as opposed to NGRX store, which is it just comes like packaged together, but it's more optional with the NGRX signals package. So we just released that package as our first major stable release of that. My team member Marco Stanimirovic worked on that for about a year at least before we actually released it as stable. And we just, like I said, we just released it as stable last week, and it's definitely got a lot of good reception there. So it's like I said, it's different in how like the mental model of the two libraries work, but both of them are, at the end of the day, help you manage state more intentionally in Angular apps in general, and using signals.
It seems like signals were mentioned and Angular somehow added them like the next day. Like they were in an official release so quickly. From your viewpoint, what style of state management do you like better, or do they like both have different use cases for you?
I think that they both have different use cases. Angular has gone a long time with using Angular, and NGRX have gone a long way with using RxJS as like the pattern for managing state. And what I think it has its merits as far as managing state of like events over time and things like that. But the learning curve was one big thing that Angular has always struggled with. And I think with the introduction of signals and having that as a first party option in the framework, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Angular has always used observables, but it never felt like it was like a first party like they fully integrated with them. It's like it was always like a 50% kind of thing. And with signals, I think it simplifies a lot of what people need to do, what people can do without having to reach for RxJS. But if they want to reach for that at some point, then they can, because they can't like rebuild the entire framework without RxJS in like a week or so. I mean, maybe they could, but they haven't done it yet. But yeah, signals are practically everywhere at this point. So the fact that they were able to build those in, and even if they make it to the browser too, that'd be one more thing that's not necessarily built in the Angular specific way, which I think ends up as a win for the platform, the web platform itself, which I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. So the difference between like observables and signals is like signals are sort of discrete. Like there is an event, maybe you can listen, or there's a state change. You like have a signal that is sort of corresponding to some value, and then observables like change over time. It's like you're adding things to a stream that you're listening to.
Yeah, outside that's the biggest difference between the two. There is something in RxJS where that behaves sort of like a signal, but uh, just the characteristics of how you get data out of an observable versus a signal. Signals is more at the end of the day, a signal is just like a wrapper around a value, and then you can call some function to, or call some method to set that value, and then call it as a function to read it just synchronously. I think that's the biggest thing. Signals are synchronous all the time. Like an observable can be synchronous or it can be asynchronous, and I think that's part of why signals are just simpler in that way. You can just read them whenever. And the part when you start bringing in things like effects on signals, that's when you get into that async behavior and some of the more nuanced things of it. But yeah, signals, you can just read it whenever and it'll just give you that value because all those things happen synchronously. And we talked about like NGRX also. It manages that same state in that way. Everything about managing state as NGRX is synchronous in the moment but you get the value of it through an observable. So that's when you get into like the asynchronous parts of it. But yeah, it simplifies how you interact with data and how you can read that data as far as rendering goes. Like when you get into like side effects and things like that, I think that's when more things come into play. But at a fundamental level, they serve different purposes.
Makes sense. Cool. So maybe let's switch over and talk about another open source project that you're working on. So you have a project called Analog.
One might say I'm addicted to open source projects. No,
well, you're at a good company for it. I'm sure you have a really, really good score.
Yes, well, I check my score I don't check my score every day, but yes, I do check to make sure that where we are in the landscape of open source projects also.
Do you get an email saying, "Hey, your open source score has changed.
Your Oscar score has gone down. What are you doing?" No, we haven't gotten to that. We don't want to make people fidgety about their scores. We just want them to naturally do what they do, and then the score will kind of reflect that over time. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Would you be interested in just like telling us like what Analog is, sort of why you built it, and how it's used?
Yeah, so I have many different pitches for what Analog is, but the one that seems to resonate people with the most is, I call it the Next.js for Angular. And Next.js is, a kind of a bucket term for a meta framework these days. So in like Vue, they have Nuxt, and Svelte has SvelteKit. Quick has Quick City. So there's these other ecosystems that have their own version of what a meta framework is, and Analog is that version, is that meta framework for Angular. And I always, when I talk, people ask like, what's a meta framework? I explain it in terms of it's more or less a set of features that I can see like commonly used across the board, like file system based routing, SSR, server side rendering, static site generation, API routes. Those are all things that are kind of built into a single cohesive package. And And like I said, Angular is a framework itself. And so we're not building everything from rebuilding everything that Angular does from scratch. We're building on top of some of the things that Angular does well, and then putting those together in a way that you can pick it up and build something like a full stack solution, or even a single page app using these features, like I said, in a cohesive way, and have some developer experience on top of that too. So, because Angular already has a lot of these pieces already, they're just, you have to assemble them. And the meta framework, I think, is in a good spot because we can build on top of those things, on top of those primitives provided by the framework, and like I said, build different use cases based on that.
I'm kind of surprised nothing like this existed in the Angular ecosystem. Was there like any type of like static site Next.js like framework for you to use?
No, not specifically. There have been a couple of projects that have come along the way before Analog was. So there was Angular Universal, which was another. Angular Universal was always more centered around server side rendering. So it was being able to run Angular on the browser and on the server. So it had been developed for a long time. I think his name escapes me now. Patrick Stapleton was one of the original authors. Him and Jeff Welpley and a few others started that project because they wanted something similar for that in Angular, like a server rendered Angular solution. And so that one was developed for a long time. It ended up turning into what today is Angular SSR. So they kind of revamped some of those pieces of that, and they brought those first party into the Angular framework. And then there was another project called Scully, which was solely focused on static site generation and the Jamstack. So it would take your Angular application and render it to HTML files, and you could ship those to a CDN or those sort of things. But there was no back end solution that was built into that. So um, Analog is probably one of the first, or I'll say the first one that kind of brings both of those two things together, like the front end and they call the BFF, the back end for front end style of framework there, so that you can have more or less most of what you need, depending on your use case, what you want to build out of the box, where you have API there, you can have your server integrations there, and have your file system based routing, as opposed to having to configure those routes manually and things like that. So yeah, it was. I had looked at those projects before and definitely got some inspiration from those. But Analog itself was meant to serve a different purpose altogether, and I think one that's has been missing kind of in the ecosystem, Angular ecosystem, for a while.
Yeah, it's cool to see that you used Vite for this, which is becoming increasingly a popular choice for building meta frameworks. I think mostly Next is ironically actually the big outlier here. So I'm not really well versed on the Angular build system, but I know that Angular CLI is used a lot of times when developing Angular projects, and it has some sort of build tools rolled into it. So, did you have any challenges in integrating Vite? I mean, was it like helpful? Yeah, just curious about your experience and using Vite in Angular.
Yeah, I jokingly say I built Analog out of spite because it was a lot of the things that I wanted to see in Angular that weren't there yet. And like you mentioned about Vite has like basically taken every framework, meta framework, like by the stranglehold, but not by the stranglehold in a bad way, but they have offered up like these APIs in a way that you can build these type of meta frameworks on top of it and like focus on the things that those frameworks want to do. And I thought that was really, and even the ecosystem that comes along with it. So I thought that was really valuable because when I started on Analog itself, I was thinking of like Webpack is stable. It's been around for a long time. Do I want to use that or do I want to use something else? And like Vite was kind of in this like transition phase to where more people were starting to adopt it. So I wanted to use that. I wanted to use Vite as like the foundation for the meta framework itself. So that was kind of how I got started there. And from there, it was as you mentioned, Angular has its own build system. They don't necessarily want you caring about how the build and config and all that works, which I think is good. But they more or less have a different stance on like giving you access to like the config, or even back in the day when it was built on top of Webpack, giving you access to the config to do more custom things. And I wanted to kind of have a different take on that. So the biggest part of integrating with Angular and Vite was like, how do I get a plugin started for Vite that will like connect Angular and Vite together? So that was the initial thing, was just how do I get the plugin off the ground, so where the two things will work together? Because I know like at fundamentally, Vite heavily relies on single file compilation, and Angular's compilation today is very much more global, where it needs to look at all your files, and because it's built on top of the TypeScript compiler, so it has to operate like under those bit of constraints there, as opposed to like React and Vue. They have a compiler that you can just transform a single file and just kind of pass it through. So which leans into how Vite works and everything like that. So kind of building those two things and getting those to work together was the initial step. But I knew that if I got the plugin working with how the Vite ecosystem was kind of continuing to grow and the tools around it, I knew that it was going to open up a lot of opportunities to build more things on top of that. So, uh, yeah, I had to learn how the Angular compiler works. I had to learn how somehow Vite works as far as plugins. Had to work around some of the things to get the two to kind of mesh well together, to get to a place where it was like fast enough. Because Angular has Angular CLI did eventually start using Vite as a dev server, but they're still using like ES-Build. It's still using ES-Build on both sides, but they use Vite as a dev server and then ES-Build to do the production build. So, but I wanted to like go all in on Vite, because I feel like that was a good bet, like on the ecosystem, to get something like that working. So that was how I kind of got started, as far as the plugin goes, and then just seeing how every tool out there has some sort of Vite integration or things like that we could kind of build on top of. I knew that was going to be big, so that's what kind of fueled the initial work after that.
As Justin said, a lot of different meta framework authors are choosing Vite to power their meta frameworks. And I think along with that, they've built a bunch of tools to help make that easier. I was going through the docs and I saw both Nitro and Astro mentioned. So how do you use that to get analog out the door?
Yeah, so once again, I knew that building a meta framework was going to be a lot of work. And I was looking at different ways on the server side of things for the API side of it. So I was trying to figure out whether it was going to like hand build everything from scratch as far as integrations with different servers. Like, of course, Express is like the well-known package out there that people have used forever. And then these are other ones like Hono or Next.js for APIs and things like that. But I wanted something that was well integrated with it. And as I was kind of looking around for different packages, Nitro kind of jumped out at me because it's the same engine that Nux uses for its server engine. And there's other meta frameworks have come along and started using Nitro also, like Solid Start, and there's 10 Stack Start, I believe, is using Nitro now. But the biggest things for me for Nitro was that it had like a pluggable JavaScript API that I could just bring into Vite as a plugin and build some things around that. And it had the server side story and the deployment story out of the box. So Nitro is what we use for the API routes in Analog, and it also powers like the deployment and server story. So that's why we were able to support like a lot of these different deployment targets like right up front, because Nitro has these different presets, based on whether you want to deploy to Netlify or Vercel or Cloudflare. They have all these things out of the box to support these different targets. Or Bun, if you want to use Bun, like they have these different presets and everything. So that was one thing I was looking to do, or looking to support, without having to like rebuild the whole world again, because I knew that was going to take probably more time than I wanted to. So Nitro has definitely played a big part, just as much as I'll say a part of analog as Vite has, because Vite handles the the plugins and bringing everything together. Then Nitro kind of gives you that same experience on the server side of things. So being able to use that and getting some support from the Nitro team, Daniel Rowe and Puya, definitely helped me in the early days of answering questions and seeing what we could do there to try to get it working together. Because it definitely works a little bit differently across different meta frameworks, but it's flexible enough to support those different use cases, which worked out for us.
I really love to see this kind of convergence. I mean, using Vite, using Nitro, just trying. Like it's funny because there's not really as much difference between these meta frameworks as like you would think. They all kind of try to do similar things, and there's like some pretty large maintenance burdens in developing these things from scratch. So it is nice to see a lot of reuse here.
Yeah, I definitely saw that as a bonus, being able to, because then in the same way I get to say, hey, we support all these things out of the box, already, and it's because it's like the typical open source model, like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, not to be cliche, but um, they have already invested a bunch of work in how Nitro works, and one of those things that they had like as a goal of Nitro was that it was agnostic of any other tool, developer tool that you can use, so that you can drop it into anywhere. If you know how to configure it, then it'll work out of the box to give you like a core set of features that you can use. And the Nitro plugin that's in analog actually will work just in a vanilla Vite app also. So you could take the API routes and you could take the server side rendering and the deployment and drop that into like a regular Vite app, whether it uses React or Solid or something else. And you could get it working there too. It's just if you know where to like plug in the entry points for like the server integration of it, it'll work in those environments too. And I did that intentionally because I hadn't seen Vite and Nitro plugin out there that does that specifically. So I figured if we're gonna get it working there, then we could still have an option to kind of spin that off if we needed to.
It's so cool how like it took Vercel like hiring the React team, having a whole Next.js team, iterating for 8 years, and now we're at a place where I could sling together a few packages, write my own framework, and have Andrew.js like probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure. They have invested a lot of resources into Next, and I'm sure they have their reasons why. But like I said, I don't think betting on what everybody's using as a web ecosystem is a bad bet. So because like I said, the Vite team they listen to a lot of they listen to feedback that we have as far as what we need in meta frameworks, and even Vite is continuing to evolve just based on how they've grown and the needs that with these new solutions that have come out, like even supporting like Reactive server components and these new server function that everybody's like building in, those sort of things, all those kind of play into it. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's interesting to see how Next how that ends up going, because like I said, they're kind of building an island, I would say, as far as their own build tooling goes, and they may want to control some of that, but as far as the rest of, if everybody else is able to like move along more quickly, then we'll see how that kind of shakes out in the end.
Yeah, I think in some ways they have just like the weight of a lot of historical decisions, and that has a lot of momentum, and redoing a lot of that stuff would be hard. But at the same time, it's nice because they also, in some ways, have been tastemakers for the ecosystem, and are like, oh, here are the kinds of features that we expect. And now we as a community get to say, all right, they've done it the hard way. Now, how can we do it?
It's like, thank you very much. We will take those features also, so everybody can use them without necessarily having to deploy to a specific place or things like that. So yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see they've proven that you can't rebuild Webpack in 2 years. It's it took Webpack has been around for I don't know how long, and they're still at it. So with Turbo Pack and everything. So even other tools like I just saw a couple of days ago, like RS Pack had their own version of Next.js built on RS Pack. So even they're like trying to chase and trying to build something quickly to kind of get into that space, at least to show that it's possible to do, which I think is which is pretty interesting to see.
So when you're talking about like integration with Angular and Nitro, so it's like Nitro is sort of helping with like server side rendering and static site generation and stuff. But like, were there any challenges just like getting Angular to work well with that? I mean, sometimes there are like assumptions about what code should be included. Maybe that's some of that's like internal to Angular and whatever else. So it's like, did you what were your hardest challenges there?
Yeah, I did have to wrestle with Angular some, and the good part about it was some of the parts in Angular have evolved to where I didn't have to wrestle as much. One thing that has made a big difference in Angular, as far as analog is concerned, is standalone components. There's a concept in Angular that's sort of legacy now called NG modules, to where you had to put these components in an NG module so that they could be aware of each other. And they kind of flipped that concept around and made it to where components, pipes, and directives can be standalone, and that you just bring them into where you need them inside a component and make them available directly there. So that was one thing about it. And the standalone components, and we mentioned about Astro earlier, is that was one of the things that allowed the Astro integration to come along because, like I said, having to use NG modules was just like another barrier of trying to use Angular components within Astro. So the first step was, can we get Angular working within a Vite plugin? So that was kind of like I said, marrying those two like compilation ideas together, and then from there it was how can we see if this will integrate with other ecosystems, because that's a part of what analog is also, is opening Angular up to other ecosystems, because Angular has always been about, I call it the Angular way. Like you do things a certain way, you stay with it with Angular recommended tools, you keep the blinders on, and then you can live in this sort of pseudo paradise, I would say. Um, but there are some places like Astro came along and they were like, hey, you can bring your own UI framework, components and things. It's like, okay, so that's cool. I would like to have some of that also. But some of the things in Angular didn't lend themselves to do that. And standalone components kind of opened up that door to be able to do that. So the Vite integration and also Astro moving to Vite, that was a big unlock also. They were using like Snowpack back in the day, and they moved off of that because they saw where Vite was going and they saw that they could integrate with it. Um, so them moving to Vite, and then getting the plugin to work was a big challenge. Just trying to get those two things working together, and then trying to integrate in with Astro, so that you can use Angular components within Astro projects, was an early integration, I would say, because they started providing those integrations pretty early in the life cycle of Astro, and trying to build a plugin that worked, reasonably well that you could use Angular components with. It wasn't like the next step of that. So that integration came out of, these different ecosystems kind of evolving on their own and enabling some of these things. So, because like I said, some of these things wouldn't be possible in analog if it wasn't possible in Angular. So, um, Angular has changed along the years to be able to be a little more flexible in that way, to let people like me and other people in the ecosystem build stuff on top of it.
So, speaking of module formats and component formats, you guys have your own custom one that you integrated. So, can you detail what SFCs are in the context of analog and why you built them into the framework?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, Angular is opinionated in the way that it does things as far as how you build components. And so components in Angular use TypeScript, top to bottom. Components use decorators, but they're not like actual decorators. They're just like annotations on the component that they use for the compiler. And so to construct the Angular component, you have to go through this thing. You have to explain what a decorator is. You got to explain this decorator metadata, explain what selectors are, and things like that. And with Angular evolving in terms of becoming faster, integrating with signals, just becoming more lean with its APIs, I wanted to see what that would look like in the context of, okay, what if we, not backward compatibility aside, Angular's history aside, what if we like reimagine what an Angular component could look like? And that's what the analog SFC is. It was looking at different frameworks, how Angular works. The minute you change something about how templating works in Angular, everybody says, "Oh, it looks like React." And I'm like, well, they don't they don't even work the same as far as the rendering model goes. So the SFC, it's more like a mix of Vue and Svelte as far as the syntax for authoring goes. But it works like an Angular component under the hood because we compile it in a way, or we convert it in a way that the Angular compiler knows how to turn that into JavaScript. Um, so we when we initially rolled it out, we called it the .ng extension because it felt like a natural fit there. But it did cause some friction in the ecosystem as far as people thought that it was an official Angular concept, that we're coming to take away your class components. And then they were like, no, that's not what it was for. So we ended up changing the extension to .analog so that it just be a little more clear delineation there. But the idea is the same. It's still an experimental feature today. It's what I would like to see Angular component authoring change to, if they could change it without like breaking the entire ecosystem. So the SFCs, as opposed to having like decorators and TypeScript classes and all that, you have a script tag where you can define your TypeScript. You have a template tag where you put your HTML, and a style tag where you put your CSS or SAS or whatever. And you still get all the benefits of Angular. You just don't have like the mental overhead of trying to construct these components in that particular way. Um, yeah, and it's still being well received. People are still using it, even though I've shouted from the rooftops that it's experimental and everything. But people have definitely liked the format. And will it ever make it into Angular? I don't know. My gut reaction is that it probably won't, just because the format that they have today, I think they're going to continue to improve that and continue to improve that authoring format. And even if they do introduce something different, introduce another authoring syntax, I think it may look a little slightly different. So, but this was something I think could live in analog pretty reasonably well, and allow us to kind of play around with that and see what that potential future could look like.
So wrapping up here a little bit, you've done a lot of work to like kind of build out the vision of the Angular ecosystem that you want. But what is one thing that you still think the Angular ecosystem could improve?
My wish is that, besides, of course, if you give me one thing to to ask from the Angular ecosystem, is to reboot the component authoring, and we've shown that that's possible with the analog SFCs. But if we're looking at anything else, um, I think that Angular should be moving into more of a full stack framework. Analog is already there with how we've kind of built all these things together. And I'm not saying they have to do that today, but I think they should move in that direction. And it was part of why I started Analog in the first place, because Angular, like I said, today has lots of parts and pieces that you can build on your own. But I think the definition of a framework is kind of changing in that way, and people want you to give them more tools and things closer together across client and server. So it's like what's old is new again. But I think for Angular to continue to have a stake, in the web space. They need a solid story around like a full stack experience, even outside of analog itself. Because a lot of people are just going to choose Angular because it's maintained by Google. They have some sort of comfort in that. So having that story being out of the box that people can use, I think is pretty compelling. So if there was something besides the component authoring, I think continuing down this path of kind of blending the client and server together is what I'd like to see continue to improve.
Maybe to build off of that, sort of as we wrap up here, we always like to ask a future facing question. And you've got a lot of open source experience, specifically working in like state management and now sort of building out a meta framework for Angular and sort of watching the trends over the last several years. What do you think the future of front end frameworks, either from the meta framework angle or from the state angle or from both? Like, what does this future look like for us, or what would you like to see?
Yeah, I would like to see more collaboration across the frameworks. I think like Vite is like a shining example of that, of what happens when you have like a solid foundation that everybody can use, and we can have these discussions about features that we're building or features that we want without, hey, my thing is better than yours or whatever. I mean, we're still going to have those conversations. But for me, the future is collaborating on those things. And I think building some sort of standards around these particular feature sets that we have in these different ecosystems, like even the features of meta frameworks. I mean, whether you want to use those or not, I think is a separate discussion. But like there's still a story I think to be told around how front end frameworks handle server functions, because everybody has like their different way where we use server here and then we use something else over here. They kind of mean the same thing. So I would like to see some convergence on some of these ideas, and then because that way we get to move to whatever the next thing is after that, which is like server components or server only components. Those type of things are things that I would like to see us have more discussions around, or even signals in the browser. I think is one that's kind of jumped out of nowhere and gained a lot of traction. So if we get signals in the browser, then it's available to everyone, whether you're building a framework or not. So what are we going to do with that? Like is the future of front end frameworks, everybody uses signal primitives and effects and everything. And then if that is the case, then how are we going to like solidify the story around those things that we don't have to build our own way or build separately now because they're just supported in the browser now. So those are some of the things I would like to see in the future front end frameworks. From my point of view, I'm a big like application. I call it like application infrastructure person, not so much less like CSS and things like that, because the people who do that are amazing. So, but I like to see us have these different tools and things that help us just ship things faster and have a nicer developer experience around it. Also, is a big thing for me.
Nice. That's really awesome. Yeah, I can't help but to agree. I think that, shining examples, Vite and Nitro and, Rollup, ESBuild, there's a lot of these tools that are getting leveraged all over the place, and I'm excited to see it. I think more solid primitives helps us all, build better applications. So, yeah, I hope that future does come to pass.
I can already hear the people on Twitter complaining that we have a new iteration of all our frameworks again.
Hey, they're going to do it. They're going to do it anyway. So we might as well get some of the things that will outlast some of the frameworks while we're at it.
True. And with that wraps up our questions for this week. Thanks for coming on, Brandon. This was a really fun dive into all things Angular, something we haven't done all that much on this podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, to echo that, thanks again, Brandon. So funny that you are in the same town that I went to college in. So if I'm ever in the area, I'll hit you up. Maybe we can grab a beer or something. But thanks for coming on.
Yes, please, please do.
Cool. Sounds good.